Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the stream. Can you just let us know before we start if our mics and audio is all good? Jason, have a little chat, see if the audio levels are similar. Welcome to the stream. Wait. Can you just let us know before we start if our mics and audio... I had the stream playing, so I was getting feedback there. Oops. All right.
I had it playing too.
Yeah.
Sorry there. Just fix it.
Jason is quiet apparently. I think that's because you weren't talking at the time, but you're talking now.
Okay, am I better now? I'll talk like a normal human for a second.
Yeah, I might turn you down a tiny bit. It looks like on the audio levels you're pretty high. Okay, there you go. All right, everyone's saying it's all good, so...
Okay.
Welcome. I think this is number 11 or 12. I actually had the number in memory last time, and this time I just forgot to check. So we're somewhere around there. We'll get to 100 one day. And today we have Jason Weimann. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I guess. Why not? I'm Jason. I'm a game developer at a YouTube channel. You might have seen it. It's just my name on YouTube. I've been working in video games for, I don't know, like 20 years or so, making a bunch of different stuff, MMOs, mobile games, VR stuff, and just all kinds of different game development stuff. I like to talk about code, and pretty much what my whole YouTube channel is about, just mostly about the programming side of game development and a little bit of other random stuff. So that's pretty much me.
Yeah, I think obviously there's quite a bit of overlap in what we cover. I think one thing I like about your channel is there's quite a bit about your experience in the industry, because I'm in a position where I don't technically have experience in industry. I'm 19. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I've mentioned it on stream before because a lot of people like to ask, everyone's age, because some people think, I'm too young to get into game dev, I'm too old to get into game dev or coding. People think both those things quite a lot of the time, but I don't think people should look at that really as a barrier to entry.
Oh, no. I think 19 is a perfect age to get into it, like start making your first game. I'm like more than double that, so there's no reason not to get in older either. In fact, I know a lot of people who've got into game development in their late 30s, even 40s, and weren't programmers before. They just liked games and got into it. But I think that ideally, starting out when you're young, when you're a teenager, 19, 18, 17, even as in middle school, like getting used to coding, starting out and just programming, like, obviously nobody's going to be amazing when they first start out, but you're going to be way ahead of everybody else because you start way sooner. So I would start as quick as you can, but I wouldn't also ever wait or delay. Like if you're past, you're not a teenager anymore, you're doing something else, you're a dentist or a doctor or whatever thing that you're bored of doing, like get into game dev.
Yeah. I feel like I had the intention of getting into it for game dev, like for actually making a game. And then before I even got to that point, I'm now here just on the education side of things, which means I get to work on projects to teach without the kind of thing behind me saying, you need to release this and get it onto Steam and have it like sell really well and market it. As long as I teach it well, that's kind of the thing there. So I do plan at some point on obviously making my own game or working on a team and making a game at some point. But right now, with all the channel stuff and the game dev TV stuff, I've already got something to keep me busy. So I'm happy for now.
Yeah. But I will say that working on a team, even part-time when you're doing stuff like that, though, it does help a lot because it'll give you lots of other problems and solutions to kind of think about as you're teaching too. So when you're going through, if you're dealing with problems, even like I said on a smaller part-time contract or something, it kind of gives you like extra ideas for content and stuff, and then also pitfalls and things that come up that you wouldn't have normally thought of. So definitely a benefit there to doing both at the same time if you ever get the opportunity.
Yeah, and we actually got a donation from In and Out saying, have either of you guys taken advantage of the Unity Asset Store sale going on this week? I actually was looking on the Asset Store earlier for no reason in particular. I think I was just looking at some state machine stuff or some character controller stuff, and I saw this thing called... It'd be good if I could actually remember what it was called. But it was on half price, and I was tempted to get it. But then I was thinking again, am I just going to waste my money on this? Do I even need this asset? Which, I know some people will flog a lot of money on the Asset Store. You'd like to admit something there.
That's definitely me. Yeah, I'm looking through here, and I was looking at the stuff on sale, and most of them are gray. I already bought them.
Is that a good thing to admit or a bad thing? I mean,
I don't know. It's definitely an addiction. But I mean, a lot of time for me, I'll see things on sale, and if they're a really good deal, and I get a little bit of inspiration out of them, like I think I'm gonna make something with it. That's usually what'll make me grab it. Most of the time, I'll grab it and I'll spend like an hour with it, and then I'll realize that, oh yeah, that was a bad idea. I don't actually want to spend the next year and a half building this into a game. But
yeah.
it gives me the little bit of excitement and trying things out. And I have an addiction, just like it looks like Jason's story mentioning his 300 plus.
Yeah.
300 plus this week. Yeah, I haven't bought anything this week, but I'm gonna look because it is Black Friday time. So
I have a feeling like.
worth...
Oh, go on.
Oh no, I was saying it's worth checking them out.
I think the only thing I own on the asset store that's a paid asset is Odin Inspector, because I saw a few people cover it. I think even you covered it and Charles covered it, and it looked useful. I think that's the only thing I've ever like actually spent money on the asset store, and I got it for like I think £40 at the time or £30. It was on some kind of sale, and yeah, I've used it. I've definitely used my money's worth on that. That's over time. I got it about a year or two ago, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that I buy a lot of assets when I'm working on projects. It's like I have an idea for a project and I'll grab a ton of different assets and try them out, like different art assets to try out different themes that I might want to do, or sometimes different code or system assets because there's a thought of a system or a thing that I want to do, but I don't want to spend the next day trying to figure out exactly how to code it up and make it perfect. So just grab the asset for $10 or whatever, or $20 and install it, try it out, and see how it works and if I'm actually making something fun. Again, 99% of the time, I just abandon them and don't do anything with them. But then a lot of the time later on, I'll come back and I'll use those assets in a video or something, right? So I'll make a tutorial and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just use that in there. So I feel like I always have a good excuse for buying assets. Like if I don't use it, I can still make a tutorial out of it later or put it in there somehow.
Yeah, you always get some use out of it, or you can at least see it as you're helping the creator of the asset. So you're just supporting them somehow. Yeah, we had a question come in very early about like, do either of us have a go-to technique, software, or resource to implement multiplayer? Now, I'm sure people who watch my channel know that's been the main focus recently, and I think you mentioned you've been delving into multiplayer. I mean, obviously you've done it in the past, but right now specifically, you're getting into some multiplayer projects.
Yeah, so I've got for anybody who hasn't seen stuff before, I've been doing a ton of multiplayer and MMO development in the past. I spent the majority of like my starting career was doing AAA MMOs, but lately I haven't been doing a whole lot of network stuff. So one of the videos or the things I'm going to do soon is a stream, probably Saturday if I can get it all ready by then, to do a multiplayer game in Unity using Mirror. I did a couple streams building a multiplayer game that uses PlayStation controllers. So I made it single player, then made it multiplayer with controllers. And now in the next stream, I'm just going to do a conversion to switch the multiplayer local controller version over to multiplayer networked with Mirror. So yeah, hopefully have it be ready to do it live on Saturday. I just need to make sure that I've worked out any issues and kinks with my configuration and stuff, and the timing and all that. But yeah, it's as far as like go-tos, I wouldn't say that I necessarily have one in Unity anymore. I used to use Photon as like my default, and then we would sometimes write custom stuff if we needed it, write out some custom networking. Now, all of the projects that I've had since then, though, already had some networking or we had some other system set up. But going forward, if when people ask me what to look at and what to use, Mirror tends to be the recommended one, even though I don't have any personal like real project experience with it, just because again, all the projects were already done in other things. But it seems to me like it's the best alternative out there for Unity right now to get started quick and build a game out. So I've been playing with it over the last couple of days. I actually grabbed your courses, Tanya, grabbed that earlier to go through and see what kind of cool nuggets I can get out of there. I'm sure there are going to be lots of things that I don't know about Mirror. And for everybody who's not familiar with networking too, most networking libraries they generally do the same thing, right? They're sending messages across the network and synchronizing some data. And then the differences tend to be in performance, like how fast it is, how good it's going to work, how much memory it's going to allocate and stuff, and how easy it is to use, like how much of the stuff you have to implement yourself. It seems to me with Mirror that it's pretty quick and you don't really have to do much of the actual implementation. It's very much like coding a local multiplayer game. except for thinking through the logic of where things need to get called. This needs to be called by the server and controlled by that. This needs to be called by the client, or requested by the client, but not controlled by it. And then synchronizing all of that state up. But it's not really a lot of code. It's much more of a logic type thing, thinking through the logic and the steps there. So I find that it doesn't matter too much what network library you use for like the complexity of building stuff. But if you want to have like low complexity and I guess good performance, Mirror seems like the right option. At least I haven't seen a better recommendation for anybody getting started. So
yeah,
you just grab your course and go through it. I've been looking through and it looks like you've got it really simple setup, showing through how to build. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but it looks like you go through a whole RTS setup, spawning units, moving stuff around. So seems worth it to me.
Yeah, we made the first section quite short, just about each concept. Like one was about syncing variables, one was about like RPCs, remote procedural calls, and then we had a little section or a little lecture on like client server authority, just explaining, you don't want to allow clients to just have full control over the game because you'll get cheaters, and that's just one of the issues. But yeah, and then the second section is like, all right, that's simple. You have a character that moves around and everyone else can see it, and your names are above your heads, and that's all synced. And then now let's make an actual fun little game. And we had considered doing multiple games, but that would lengthen the course by a lot. And we believe that, with the fundamentals in the section 1, and then like a pretty detailed implementation for section 2, making the RTS, then people, if they want to make other types of games, then they can take it from there. But each game has its own kind of, not pitfalls, but hurdles to overcome, whether that's like, or the lag prediction, not lag prediction, but lag compensation, and client prediction, because I don't think, honestly, that Mirror supports it out the box, at least. And yeah, looking into all that stuff and like the rollback, and I've been looking into the new Unity netcode preview packages that are super early in preview, and they have that out the box. The only problem is it's really early in preview, and it only supports dots at the moment.
Right.
So
and it's been like that since 2018. Right?
Has it? I didn't know it's been out in preview.
I remember when they showed it at Unite. I think it was Unite 2018, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! It's super high performant." And then we spent like the next 2 days trying to figure out how to get the thing to compile and work. And like, it's cool and it's super performant, but it was very much, at least the last time I looked at it, it felt very much like custom game code, not so much like a library that everybody just uses and taps into. Obviously, I'm sure that's going to change over time. Well, I'm not 100% sure, but I expect that's going to change over time, and that they'll put something in that stays long term. But I never know. I mean, like, UNet was around and kind of just got abandoned, and then like,
then it got...
I never know what's going to happen with systems. I always just kind of go with whatever's out there and stable, and try to stick with that, and try to minimize jumping too much into the preview things, just because I never know if they're going to come to fruition or totally change and be something different. Plus, I also wouldn't want to make the jump to dots just for it. But
yeah,
not that you were arguing for that at all.
No, I was just saying, like, that does have those things out the box, whereas Mirror doesn't. So, like, that's nice not having to think about it. But if you do want to use Mirror, because, like you said, it's not using dots, and that's a selling point for a lot of people right now, is they don't have to move over and learn an entire new architecture. And then, at the same time, it's... free, open source, all the other good things that come with it. It's familiar to you if you've used UNet, because it's just a revival of that. They've just dug it out from its grave and kept it going. I mean, I don't know. I never used UNet back when it was not deprecated, so I don't know what new features Mirror have added themselves that weren't there back then. But most of, like, if I've ever looked up a Mirror question online, I always get UNet answers that are really old, but they're still relevant. Because all the syntax is pretty much the same. Like, the attributes you use and how you actually make it is pretty similar to how it used to be, if not the same, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like it's almost or very close to like a one-for-one replacement. I saw the transition guide, and I was just finding somebody in chat saying that it looks like they're making a new UNet replacement that'll work with both. Yeah, I didn't know about that, so that's exciting. That would be really cool. I think something like that is important, not requiring people to switch over to a completely different paradigm from what 95 or 99% of the people are using to use the network makes sense. Like, it should just be a plug and play type thing like Mirror is. And I mean, like I said, I think it's easy enough to just get in with Mirror. I wouldn't wait around for anything else. Just hop in and start building stuff. Yeah. And it seems pretty extensible too with the way they've got the transport system set up, so you can adjust it and make it run for. I don't know what types of games it'll actually support, but my guess is it probably support just about anything if you understand the transport layer enough and can write it in yourself. I don't know if you have more stuff we want to talk about multiplayer or.
Well, we'll just move on to some more questions, but like with that, yeah, I'd say right now I'd recommend Mirror. There's no point in waiting to start when the Unity official out the box solution comes, because that could be another year or longer. We don't know. So don't wait, just have a go with Mirror, and if that comes out, the chances are the knowledge you've gained by using Mirror will be transferable. So it's definitely.
Oh, they definitely will. Yeah, I mean the info, the stuff that you're gonna learn from making a multiplayer game is all about that. Like I said, the server authority and essentially the number one rule of just never trusting the client. Just always assume, if you don't want people cheating in your game, at least always assume the client is lying. Always assume that every message from them is a hacked message that's trying to cheat and destroy the game and kill all the other players. One of them will be every time.
Yep. I mean, I've done things before and people have said, but why don't you just do that on the client side? And I'm like, well, then the game will be very easily ruined. And the thing is, it's not even just a case of cheating can then ruin the game. Lagging can too. If you have like client-side movement and the client's lagging, then that's when you see games where people are just glitching around everywhere. When it's just like one guy that's lagging is glitching out, but everyone else looks fine. Yeah.
Or you get like the one guy that's, for instance, if your client is controlling shooting, right? So if your client says when to spawn a bullet every time, and then your client is lagged out for 5 seconds or something and suddenly connects and all those messages come and everybody gets all the bullets at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you have like all the like reloading logic on their side and the fire rate stuff, then yeah, it's easily lag can ruin it, but then they could easily cheat it and just ruin the game very easily. We got another donation by In and Out again, which was, what does Nathan think about Ryder JetBrains? Is it JetBeans? He put Jet.
It's JetBrains.
I always thought it was JetBrains. Yeah, I read that and I was like, wait, was I?
Just a typo.
Yeah.
R and E are next to each other.
Yeah. Have I used it before? Yes, very briefly. The main thing that put me off was the fact that you had to pay for it, and I didn't see like a reason to change. I usually use Visual Studio for the GameDev TV stuff. I use VS Code because they want to have like Mac and Windows users using the same thing because then it's easier to help people. And I know there is Visual Studio on Mac, but I think it looks different and it's a different like thing entirely. So I usually just work in VS or VS Code. I've tried Rider, but yeah, I mean, it has some cool features that Visual Studio doesn't have out of the box. I mean, what do you use? Do you use Rider? I can't remember.
So for my personal stuff, I generally use Rider. For videos, I use I was using Rider for a while, but a lot of time I just use Visual Studio, mostly just so that it's more familiar and comfortable with people. I feel like when I use Rider in videos, a lot of the questions and comments are about what is the editor, why does mine look different, that kind of stuff. So I only use Visual Studio to minimize the distraction, but for anybody who hasn't used it before, I would definitely recommend like go grab the trial and but do it in a time when you can force yourself to only use it for the month that you have it, because when I did that myself, so I had friends who recommended Rider, multiple friends who recommended Rider for a couple years for Unity stuff because of the way that it integrates and some of the tips and other things that it does to help you make your code better. But I avoided it because I'd install it and the hotkeys were different. The UI was a little different. Things were moved around. I was like, I don't want to deal with this. I can't find things. And I hit a button and the thing I wanted to happen didn't happen, right? Or something else happened. I just keep like switching back. But then it was last year? It might have been 2 years ago now. I decided to just try it out, and I was talking to a friend, and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do it for 1 month. I'm only gonna use Rider that's it. I'll just use it for a month, and then like at the end of the month, if I decide like that was stupid, I'll just remove it and I won't do it again. And I can tell everybody I tried it for a month and I didn't like it, right? But then I did it at way before I got a month in. Once I got probably like 2 or 3 weeks in and started getting really comfortable with it, I started seeing the ways that it was helping my code get better. And it's mostly through just a lot of good recommendations and hints that are Unity specific. It gives a lot of good Unity related tips on how to do things and how to improve things just as you're coding. That Visual Studio just doesn't have the context around it. I feel like, I don't know exactly how they do it, but I think somebody on the writer team there is into Unity and really likes the integration, is working hard to make sure that the integration is the best that's possible. So if the cost isn't a factor for you, then I would highly recommend switching to Writer. It is like, I think it's like $7 a month or something. I don't remember exactly, but they have an annual plan. But try out the free trial at least. It's definitely worth it. And I think they even have a free student one too, for people who are students. You can just grab like a free copy. But I'm not sure exactly what that plan is anymore.
Yeah, I guess my view is it looks good. I don't use it, so I can't speak for it. I can't, but I will probably at some point like give it a try again, because I do remember like the Unity specific, help and advice about, for example, I'm guessing one of the things I remember was if you just leave an empty update loop, it's like, don't do this, it still gets ran even though it's empty and that you've left it in there, that kind of thing. That if you're new to Unity, you might not know, and even if you're experienced, you might have just left it by accident in one of your scripts, and sure, it's not going to cause your game to lag out just because that one update that's empty, but still, in terms of cleaning it up and just making it as performant as it can be, then yeah, I don't know what other kind of things there are. Maybe caching camera.
One of the ones that it helped me with was the when you do the question mark dot to do a null check.
Yeah.
And if you do that on a mono behavior component, it'll actually warn you and tell you not to do it and offer the recommendation to auto fix it. But it'll know that it's only from a mono behavior. And if you're not sure why, you click on it, it'll take you to a full article that explains exactly why this is a problem, what the situation is that could cause it to throw an exception, like the object being destroyed but not cleaned up all the way because of the object life cycle. And like they have a lot of just information that'll explain that kind of stuff in there. And that's one of the obvious ones. But there's a lot of other like just little recommendations that'll pop up. I felt like after I used it for a while, my code got better. I just felt like it looked cleaner. It felt like my code felt like it was getting improved just by the recommendations.
Yeah, the thing about using question mark as a null check on a Unity object, that's actually in Visual Studio now. I've noticed it the last few times I've tried to do it, and it's like, this will work, but it could cause some problems sometimes. I can't remember what.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, they have got that in there now. I don't know if it gives you like a fully detailed, this is why, and here are all the problems that could happen, but I'm almost certain I've tried it recently and it's been a thing.
Oh, yeah. Nice. That would be good. I mean, I'd love for Visual Studio to have all those things. I mean, it'd be great because then everybody would have it by default.
Yeah.
I would, yeah. If anybody works for Microsoft, like, you should copy everything Writer's doing because it's awesome.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, so Playfab. Have you used Playfab before at all? Or...
I haven't. I know people who have, and they seemed to like it, but I don't have any personal experience with it.
Yeah, because it seems to have a lot of like cool features, especially if you're making obviously it's designed for multiplayer games because they have obviously server hosting and like leaderboards. I'm trying to remember I can't remember all the features they support. It's all on the front page, but yeah, it seems pretty good, and they do have like a free plan where you can use it up to a certain amount of users free of charge, and for someone who's developing, it's definitely fine because whenever I've done projects, I've always hosted locally. The games have been designed for, you in your friends group, one of you hosts and the others connect, just as if I was like hosting a Minecraft server for my friends. But a lot of people want to know, yeah, but how do I get it onto a server? And obviously, sure, you can just manually go in and run the build on a server, but then for an RTS, you want to have matchmaking. That's another thing to support, matchmaking. And with matchmaking, you then need to spin up instances of the game to handle each match. It's not like you can go and just run one instance of the game and it's sorted. It's a lot more involved than that. So I think they do support all of those different things. As for how good the documentation is, I'm not sure, but I am looking into it all, and I'm hoping to do videos on it, but I'm not going to give a date for that because it's a bit too soon to say. But yeah, I think Unity are pushing it because don't Unity own Playfab?
I don't know. They bought Multiplay. I don't know about Playfab.
I know it's Azure that owns Playfab. It's Azure Playfab, right?
Okay, Azure owns. Okay, so yeah, they bought Multiplay though, which I think does some of the same stuff. I don't know what their Unity integration looks like right now though.
Yeah, there's
another one that's out there, but I haven't used it. And I think they host on Amazon and Google and Azure.
Yeah, there's also Vivox for voice and then some other stuff. I mean, there's a lot of overlap between what these services offer, I think there's quite a bit of overlap. So it can be confusing, I think. Like, what do I use if I want to do it? People don't really know, and I don't know personally exactly which to use.
A lot of the time it comes down to pricing too. People will figure out, like when you're doing like a real game and a release, you're going to figure out what place is going to be the most efficient cost-wise to host our games. Because there are going to be giant differences in pricing hosting on one service versus another for different types of games.
Yeah.
Based on how you use your network and how you spin up your servers. Like you only have to spin up a couple instances and a bunch of people are on those versus you have to spin up, an instance for every 2 people and you got to do thousands of those or something. So a lot of it comes down to just figuring out exactly what your needs are and then the costs and how well that's going to work, or which options are going to be most cost effective and the easiest to get set up with too.
Yeah, I think that's it for the Playfab question. I think you might have better insight on this than me, but how similar is Unity to other game engines in the industry? I mean, I can say my side of it quickly because it's not very long, which is I have dabbled in Unreal and I've dabbled in Godot, and I've barely used them. Like, if we look at the percentage of Unity to Unreal to Godot, I've used Unity for probably 98 or 99% of the time spent using game engines. I can't even remember the reasons I tried them. I think it was for the sake of giving them a shot to see if, like, I want to switch, and I didn't ever switch. I was like, nah, Unity's got everything I need, and it's simple enough, and it's also complex enough at the same time that there's no like ceilings that I've hit where I'm like, oh, Unity can't do this. So yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience too with Unity, that I haven't run into any reason to switch away since I made the jump to it. So I used to do a lot of work in Unreal and older versions of Unreal before Unreal 4 came out. And custom engine stuff, a lot of games that were just built in custom in-house engines, and a little bit of CryEngine stuff too. But overall, I would say that, like, as far as engines go now, my Unity or my Unreal experience is relatively minimal, just because I switched to Unity and I've been so into it and only using it for the most part. But I get the feeling I get is that they're still very similar, that there's not a lot of difference. There are obviously some things that are different getting started. Some things are easier, I think, to do in Unreal getting started, especially if you have no coding experience. And I think it's a little bit harder to get started with Unity if you have no programming experience and you don't plan to do code. But I find that you can do just about anything in either of them, but it's a bit faster to ramp up in Unity, and it's a bit faster to ramp up to bigger projects, I guess, is more the thing that I've seen. Because I find that managing, at least for me, managing big C++ projects and then adding in visual scripting, if we choose to do that, gets complex and a little bit more confusing than C# code. Like I feel like C# code is just a little bit easier to read, understand, and manage and maintain. You have less stuff to deal with. You can be a bit more productive and do it a little bit quicker. But I mean, there are definitely some benefits of Unreal too. Like they have a really nice built-in networking system that works, so you can just build an FPS and not have to, go buy a bunch of packs and figure out how to get it all together. It's just there, right? And you can get a lot of those starter packs already kind of ready to go with good systems that are somewhat viable in a real situation. So there is some difference there, but if you're, I guess when it comes down to like actually picking which engine to use, I'd say it depends a lot more. Well, there are two key things. One is like what you actually want to do. Do you want to get a job working on some specific game? Because if you do, you should, without a doubt, learn whatever engine that is, right? If there's a game that you want to work on or a company that you want to work for and you're learning the engine that they don't use, you're probably doing it wrong. You should just learn the stuff that they're using, because you're going to be the ideal candidate there versus the one that doesn't know any of the stuff that they actually do. But when it comes to, I was losing my train of thought. But if you just want to like learn how to code and make your own games, I would without a doubt go to Unity. Or if you're not sure, you're just kind of up in the air, or you're not sure about how you're going to make games, you've never written code before, it's going to be a lot easier to learn to program and learn to write code in C# and Unity. And then you can easily make that jump over to Unreal if you decide, hey, I got this job offer and it's an Unreal job. But you will see people get hired for engine work on engines that they've never worked in all the time. It's not the number one candidate, but if you're a good candidate and you have experience in other engines, you can definitely get jobs working on engines you've never worked on. In fact, almost everybody does, because nobody's worked on all the engines, right? You get a job on a new engine, you ramp up on it, you learn it, you figure out how it works, and then you start building from there. Once you kind of understand one, though, and you can build the games with one and write code, it's not too hard to make the jump. It's not super easy, but it's not anywhere near the same as like learning how to code or make games the first time.
Yeah, it's like
Babel for a long time.
It's all about the transferable skills. Like once you know one programming language, then you're pretty much set to go learn another one and have a much easier time. Then same with engines and same with web frameworks or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you're making the same final product. So of course the tools are going to be somewhat similar, because they're going to be useful to help you get to that final product, whether that's a game or a website or whatever. I think like a couple years ago, when I started Unity, which is maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, it's probably 3 or 4 years, they didn't have like a built-in shader tool. They didn't have a built-in localization or whatever else. And over time, they've slowly been adding those in. And localization right now is, I think, just about to come out of preview. And then obviously the shader graph's now been out for like a year or two, with all the render pipeline stuff. So a lot of the things that were missing when I started that you had to get assets for are now out of the box. Multiplayer not being one of those things. That's the only one I can think of that's not out of the box that is missing, that I would look at another engine and be like, but they have it. So there might be other things.
Yeah, that's probably the big one that stands out to me too.
Yeah. So once they've got that, then they've got everything, I guess. And obviously that doesn't mean it's going to be good just because they have it, but at the same time, at least it's there. Because right now people are like, all right, I've got this engine that everyone uses. It's the most popular game engine, but you can't make multiplayer games in it. And then it's like, yeah, you can, but you have to go use a third-party system. And
figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's find another question. So, when using copies of the same prefab, is it better to make copies of the prefab once it's in the scene view, or to drag every instance from the window in terms of optimization? I think that's just about speed that it is to actually put it in the scene. I feel like that's obviously a very minor thing, unless
technically there's not going to be any difference. Yeah, I'd just be duplicating it would be faster, because all it does is add that reference. It's like a GUID that gets added into a scene file, and it's just dropping it in there. There's no other difference.
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, the speed of how quickly you can do it.
Especially if you're trying to put in lots, the fact you can, like, for example, let's say you've already got 5 in the scene, you can select them all and hit, is it Control D? I always forget. Different software.
Control D.
Yeah, and then it'll make, now you've got 10 because you've duplicated the 5. If you're dragging them in, you, as far as I'm aware, you can't drag in and drop 10 like in one go.
No.
The prefab. So
yeah, a lot of time what I'll do is I'll take one, I'll duplicate it, move it, duplicate, move, and I'm just constantly moving the most recent one.
Yeah. Do you recommend using the traditional workflow in Unity over ECS and dots for beginners to intermediate developers? I mean, I'd say yes, especially right now. The answer could change in years to come, but I would still imagine like object-oriented is gonna be here for a very, very long time in game development. Like, I don't see it disappearing.
No, I don't either. And the majority of people are still going that route. The dot setup is great for really good performance. There's some really cool benefits there, but most projects and everybody learning doesn't need that performance. Pretty much nobody that's in their learning stages and trying to figure out how to make games needs that level of performance. Yeah. And most of the people releasing games aren't doing things that are pushing the limits that far, that all of the games that were out before didn't use that. So
yeah, if you're learning,
like it's allowing you to go beyond and do cooler, crazier things and reduce power consumption at the same time. But it's not by any means necessary or the way that I would jump into it.
Yeah, if you're learning, your chances are you're making like a rollerball or you're making a platformer or something, like 2D platformer. It's not like it's ultra realistic. I mean, what's it, the city demo, the spaceship flying around with the like extremely high detailed buildings. They have like forget what the term's called for like loading them in and out as you move around the scene. What's it called? I mean, they use subscenes in dots. I have played with dots to some extent, and I made a few tutorials back when it was in the public's hands in beta or in preview. And then about a month or two later, someone was commenting, or people saying, "Oh, this doesn't work anymore." And I was like, "I'm not making tutorials on it again until it's stable, until they stop changing all the names for everything and the code breaks."
Yeah, I did a couple right at the beginning, and then I realized, oh yeah, this is nowhere near gonna be stable. This is gonna like anything that I record now is gonna be invalid in a month, right?
Yeah. I sometimes like to cover new things for the sake of like people understanding, like you can understand right now how ECS and dots works, like the concept behind it and how you use it, so that even in a year or two's time when it comes out properly, then you don't have to start learning from scratch. You're already knowledgeable on how it works. Even if the API for it's changed, you still like understand the structure. So it's good for learning, but not the kind of like clickbait video. Dots is out, let's start using it, when it's in version 0.1 preview, and it's not a good thing to do. Like I said, I think it's good to learn it now, but it's not good to use it now, at least not in a proper project. And especially if you're learning, just stick to OOP. You'll be fine, don't worry. Yeah. Okay. Is it a good way to use scriptable objects in a save or load system? I mean, in the past, when I learned about scriptable objects, just like a lot of people do with design patterns, I was thinking, oh, scriptable objects, they're amazing, use them for everything. And then I realized, they're kind of not really meant for everything. And I did fall into a trap when I started using them because of how they serialize differently. The whole thing about, like, if you change the data when the game's running, it just saves by default. And then I thought, okay, I'll make a save system with this. And I can't remember what I did for it. I think I would take the object, convert it into JSON, write it to a file, and then do some other messy stuff and load that back up. And eventually I was like, yeah, this is not a good thing. So I'd probably say no for a save system. I don't know if you have a better...
well, you'll realize that, do an update and all your saves are gone, right? You just replace that part of the data.
I mean, sometimes the best way to learn is to learn the hard way. Luckily, it was on a personal project.
Scriptable objects, they'll just get replaced as you do like a patch or something, right? If you change that, if you had it on Steam, you'd catch that diff and it would, it would just get replaced. But
yeah.
So scriptable objects, I'm kind of the same as you. Like I don't use them heavily. I guess I got the sense that you don't really use them heavily either. I use them for settings and things, configuration for different stuff, and that's primarily it. Usually just like to configure or like make versions of different things that are modifications that don't have any visuals on them, or occasionally that have like a tiny little bit of functionality. But I don't heavily use scriptable objects either. I know there are some people out there that use them all the time for everything, but I haven't found them to be very useful. A lot of the time, it's just better to have a prefab for most of the things that I need, and then the scriptable object thing, like, it's just data that I don't. Because the real benefit there is you'll be able to serialize that data out without a prefab. It's just that I find it's very rare that I need to serialize any data that's not on a prefab already. I guess kind of the problem.
Like over time, like I said, you start learning something new, you think it's great, I'll use it everywhere. Then you slowly stop using it for things that you realize, wait, this is not what it's for. And I think the main thing I use it for now is for certain design things. Like, let's say my game has damage types and like they're predefined, right? I know there's going to be 4: fire, water, earth, and air, right? And what I'll do is I'll be like, well, certain things in the game, maybe in the UI, maybe something else, need to maybe show icons for this element, or colors, like, I don't know, on my hotbar, maybe the spell border is based on the element. So all that like design data for, like, I'll make an element scriptable object, and it'll have, maybe the name is fire, and then the color is like a color, so I set it to red, and then the icon is something a sprite that I put in, and it's a little fire icon. And then that's all saved, so anything else in the game that needs to know any data about the fire element refers back to that scriptable object. I think that's perfect. That's a great use of it too, because then it's that shared one, so you just modify it in one spot and not in all the prefabs. That's probably the best example I've heard of one, actually. I think that's really good. Like, I think apart from that, I don't use it in many other places. I mean, like you said, with configuration, if it's stuff that's not going to change at runtime, I don't know, let's say it was some settings for audio. Well, obviously, the player might want to tweak their audio settings, so I'd never use a scriptable object to store that. Maybe to store defaults to be loaded up or something, but I don't know. I mean, I'm looking right now into a video Unity released today, it's the new input system, and I've been using it for a while, but I never knew how to do rebindings at runtime with the new system, and they mentioned it there. It's been out for a while, but I haven't read into it. And they also show in the video, it's like 40 minutes long, how to do rebinding, how to handle what else? There was some really common things, like switching states, I guess. Having, like, when you're playing, you've got WASD to move, but on the UI, like when the pause menu's up, that doesn't affect the player's movement, but it does affect going up and down. And then like how to swap the states for all that stuff. What else was there? There was using Cinemachine with the new input system. Like, I don't know, they just covered a lot of the common things that I've myself have tried doing, and I'm like, wait, this isn't supported, because I tried the input system when it first came out, and it wasn't supported at the time, but now it's I think they've covered most of the bases there. Yeah. Yeah,
I still need to go through that too. I didn't know they'd released a new video on it, so I'm gonna check that out later on today or this weekend, because that's cool. I've been waiting for them to kind of finalize and stabilize the input system, and once I felt like it was, usually like at a 1.1 or a 1.2 version is when I feel like it's not going to change too much more, hopefully. Yeah. Start trying to dig into it, and I feel like it sounds like it's actually there. And it seemed like it was really close before, but I was worried like get in. The problem I always run into is like I get into things and then I'll start like teaching it, and then it totally changes. The UI, the interface, and everything changes. I'm like,
yeah, input systems now in 1.0.1 or 0.2, I think. And at the end of the video, they mention how version 1.1 is coming out soon. So it's probably at the point where, yeah, it's pretty good to use now. Like, not many things are missing from it. I only found out today or yesterday. Obviously, about like the interfaces for I pointer, enter, pointer, exit, drag, all those things. I tried using those with the new input system, but then it always tells me switch back to old input handling or use both so that it still supports it. But with some other little, I think on the event system, you can change something that allows that to use the new input system in the code, or I don't know. We're in a bit of a messy period between the two systems where it's a bit of a gray area, but
where it might break a lot of existing stuff too, right? Especially if the old input system's not working with the new one. If you don't turn that on, you go and you have any other assets or anything else that are using any of that stuff, or any existing code that's using that stuff,
yeah,
they're all break. But yeah,
I try my best if I'm making a new project to just set it to only new input system and like just don't use the old at all, unless I get to a point where I'm like, no, I can't do this. But yeah, if it's a fresh project without tons of assets imported that are all relying on the old system, I think it's good to get into the habit of the new one, because it is just better. It is more powerful. Like when I tried Unreal for that one time, that was the one thing I really liked, was the input setting up is a lot nicer, because it's similar to how Unity is with the new one. The little window for like, oh, a move is this on this controller and this on this controller. And I was like, why doesn't Unity have this? But, thankfully it does now. Yeah. How do you organize your game objects in the scene? Naming, parenting, that kind of thing.
For me, I like to just make, I'll put a couple things at the root, like my player objects. And then I'll usually have a couple like game level objects will often be at the root. And then the environment will usually be underneath some set of subfolders or sub objects. So just use an empty game object that's reset at 000 as a folder essentially. And I'll often put like square brackets around the name of it, just so that it's really obvious this one's a folder, it's not an object, just expand it out, or that it's something special. And then yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll just build them out essentially like that. Like the entire scene it'll be like an environment section, and there will be subsections of the different parts or the different key areas that are there underneath it. It's I'll often how I do it, but it also depends a lot on the specific game or project that you're building too, on how you're going to lay it out and what things are going to be in a scene versus loaded dynamically or at runtime, or in multiple scenes and then merged together too. One of the things I like to do is like split out the UI and do a totally separate scene and just load it additively at runtime.
Yeah, a lot of the like over the years I've watched so many different people's tutorials that all do their organizing slightly differently, and I must at some point have just picked up someone's way of doing it. It's not like I invented the way. It's similar to what you said, but instead of like, so what I'll do is I'll make an empty game object, call it, let's say, environment, or like UI or something like that. And I don't like put it in square brackets. I think I just use dash. I do like 5 dashes, the name in all caps, then 5 dashes again, just so it's really obvious. This is not actually an object. This is just like a sorting mechanism. And then I just put the game objects not as children, but just beneath that object. And then the next time you see another one of those dash 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 whatever, it's then like the next cutoff point. All right, these are the UI things. These are the environment scenery things, and these are the entities like the player that's already in there and default, or the enemies or whatever. There's no right way to do it. It's just a preference thing, really.
Yeah, I just make them children because I like to be able to flip them on and off really easily.
Yeah.
I like to be able to click that root object and like turn off like all the ground pieces or like all the background stuff. Like click on it, bam, they're all off.
Yeah.
Just turn them on and off when I'm developing. Or like all the enemies, I'll click on that and turn them all off.
I swear I had a reason as to why I don't put it in a folder. I swear I tried and then realized I didn't want to do it, but I can't think of a reason now, so there probably isn't one. I might just...
There is a tiny performance hit from moving them like that, but it's not big enough that I've ever noticed, so...
Okay. You could even have it so, like, when you hit play, it just unparents it from everything, just to, like...
Yeah.
And that's, not, as you said, it's probably not even a hit that anyone will notice. Yeah, should indie game devs go for multiplayer or single player? I mean, I don't think that's really like a good question to ask necessarily. It's not just...
I'd say starting out, you should start single player though.
Yeah.
If you haven't built anything, single player first.
Yeah, if you're learning at the stage of learning, then single player first, because multiplayer is just single player with a few more parts to mess with. But then if you're thinking like, I think the question was more on a kind of in terms of the market, like what is better for an indie dev to make. I personally don't know. I'm not into the market research side of things. I don't know. Oh yeah, right now single player games are doing really well. I mean, I know, what have I been playing indie games recently? I think the most recent indie game I've played is Hades, which is single player, and it's gone really well. I don't know if they're considered an indie studio. What actually is like the definition of indie and then AAA, or is there double and single A? That's one thing I've never actually looked into. Like, what is the determining factor?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm not alone not knowing that. Okay.
One of those things, like if I've heard of the company and they've released some things on consoles or big PC stuff, and I don't know. There probably is some official definition though. And for multiplayer stuff, I just want to stress too, for anybody who's really new, like you could probably build 3 to 5 single player games in the amount of time it's going to take you to build that one multiplayer game if it's the same quality of a game. Because like multiplayer game development is awesome and fun, but it makes every single task harder. Everything that you do is no longer simple and easy. You want to spawn a particle, that's probably not as easy, right? You don't just spawn the particle. You then need to figure out, like, does this particle spawn on every client? Which clients should it spawn on? Are they too far away to need to spawn it? Like, you got to figure out, you got to think about it through every single little thing, and that's like the easiest one. So
and then
if you're up in the air, go with single player, build it a bunch, and then try multiplayer after you've built a couple single player games, or build local multiplayer games first. Start that way, and then jump over to the network one, because the network side, it adds a lot of complexity and time, and the it adds like a whole step, or like a big long step of having to have 2 systems set up or 2 instances of the thing set up to constantly test and make sure that things work. And you're going to be constantly breaking things and stuff. So just be careful. Multiplayer games are a blast. They're fun to build, but I wouldn't start there.
Yeah, and with multiplayer, what was it I was going to say? There was something. Yeah, there's also the architecture, the infrastructure, like especially if you need hosting and all that stuff, like we mentioned earlier with Playfab. It's not just one more step about RPCs and clients now need to know this. It's also, all right, how are we going to host it? Which company do we choose? How are we going to handle matchmaking? Spinning up server instances, port forwarding, connecting clients. There's a lot more to it.
And funding the servers, right? You got to pay for all those servers. They're not cheap.
Exactly. Once you've shipped your single player game, you don't have to think about costs, really. At least not directly tied to the game itself. Whereas
your costs are in buying art,
yeah,
and then and advertising.
With multiplayer, it's like you've got to pay for the game, making the game, and now hosting the game. If you can't pay for hosting the game, no one can play the game. So yeah, it's another step that is necessary, and it costs money. So
And if it's not profitable to host it, then you start losing more and more money as more people play your game.
Yeah, at least with a single player game, if it doesn't do well, it's there and people can still get it and play it. Multiplayer, if you take the servers down, then the games are gone forever, basically. Unless someone salvages and runs their own private servers for it. I don't know. That happens with some games. Like, usually, not the bad games, usually the good games that people are nostalgic over when the servers have gone down. Usually. Do you guys personally make more content like this on YouTube or via your own games? What does that mean? Does that mean, like, do we spend more of our time working on games or working on teaching games stuff? I guess that's what it means.
Oh, well, if that's what it means, for me, now it's more time teaching. It was more time working on games, and it's been like, it was like 100 and 0, and it's been kind of a slow transition, and then I'm trying to move it up to like a 10 and 90, ideally, because there's still lots of game stuff I want to work on, but I only want to work on my own game stuff now. I don't want to work on anybody else's game stuff. It cuts it down to like a relatively small percent, and then a lot more on the learning stuff, or just the teaching in general.
Apparently, the question was more about like, do we basically support ourselves more off the channel or off published games? Like, which is more important for us in terms of income and just. I still think it's the same question about like, what do we spend the most time doing? I think it's probably the same. So I'd say for me it was probably about the same, and I'm trying to transition it over to more on YouTube and stuff, and just more teaching stuff and less on the games. And that's mostly just because like throughout like the entire time I've been building games, I've always just been building other people's games, right? As like somebody working at a studio, working on some design that somebody had already come up with and building it, or some design that was being come up with while I was there. And now I just kind of I have this feel like I just want to make my own like there are all these different game ideas that like throughout the years I've wanted to make, and now I'm trying to focus more on at least my game development side, just on focusing on which one of those do I actually want to build, and going through that process. So, yeah, I'm making the transition now, but for me it was the other way, and now it's definitely making the switch. Now for most, I don't know, I guess that doesn't really apply to most people though. Yeah, because they're saying most people that are wanting to make games is because they want to make money. I mean, I don't know the statistic on that. I'm sure a lot. Yeah, some people are doing it just purely for hobby, but I guess it is true. Even a lot of the hobby people would like to make games to make money off it.
Most people that I know that make money making games work at a game studio making games, and then once they have enough experience and they have a really cool idea and a couple friends that are game developers, they break off and build their own game, and then that's when they get to be successful. And I'm sure there are plenty of developers who start with never doing anything with anybody else, release a game, and it comes out. But in my experience, the people that are really successful with it and have had a lot of fun, like they learn how to code, they learn how to make games, they work with a studio. It doesn't have to be like a big studio. You just work with a couple of different indie studios, start to build up some experience, practice building games, and you meet people who are similar, like-minded, and also willing to, start working on these projects as you're going along on the side and building up your own game. So I wouldn't get in and expect like you're just gonna make an indie game, release it, and become a billionaire, right? Like, or even make like a solid living off of just releasing your first indie game. But you can definitely get in there, learn to code, and get a job making six figures relatively easy. Yeah, I don't know about relatively easy, but at least in this area or in like Austin, you can get a job relatively easy, I guess.
Yeah, because like the way I think about it is, for me, like so far, it's gone a bit differently, because I did have in mind either like, I'm gonna learn coding so that I can then work at a studio and like just make games with the goal of making games, and then on that way there, I'm like, okay, well, I'm in the stage of learning coding, and while I'm doing it, I'm making content as like kind of a portfolio, but also just kind of teaching it and just making my own stuff. And then as that was going along, before I even got anywhere near to the like applying for a job at a studio, I'm now here making content and like an actual like a course. Obviously YouTube, is just ad revenue, and it's not like the most money in the world really. At least for me right now, it's definitely not enough to live off for sure. So I needed something else to come along, and I was thinking at some point, I'm gonna either go into game or web dev, because that's the other thing I've done, not as much, but like a decent chunk of my time has been that. And then and then the GameDev TV thing came along, and then that's my current I guess priority. Obviously I'm still doing like weekly videos on the channel and these streams, and I'm not ever going to put that behind some kind of paywall or anything, but yeah, obviously I need the course or something to keep me going. I can't just survive off ad revenue on YouTube. So
yeah, it takes a lot, I think, to get to there. Even like my YouTube ad revenue is tiny.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't matter if you've got like 10k, 100k. I mean, I'm sure probably 1 million people will be able to support themselves, but
I think with Bracky's views, they're, I think, fine, good enough to retire, right? But nowhere near that. So
yeah, need something else. And personally, like, I've never, well, I always knew, making an indie game is hard, at least to sell it, right? To make the game, probably not that hard. But yeah, to sell it and actually have it sell well enough to be worth your time to put in, it's not an easy thing. You can't just get into game development, you've made a game, you've made money. And so I'm kind of lucky in the sense that education's a bit more of a safe, like once you're in, it's a bit safer, right? Because as long as you can teach it and you teach it the way people like it, then that's good. Whereas with the game, just because your game is fun to play doesn't mean it's going to sell at all. There's so many more things. I mean, the main one I hear people talk about is marketing. Is like, as long as, if the game's good but no one knows about it, no one's going to play it. And
yeah, no, I think even you could make the best game ever, and if people don't know about it, they're just not going to play it. They're not going to get into it. And even if you make a game, like most of the indie games that are going to be made are probably just not going to be fun, right? Like you build a game because it seems fun in your head, you get it out there, and most people just don't find it fun because most games probably aren't fun.
Yeah.
The ones that are really fun are the ones that explode and blow up and really take off. But I mean, as far as like security goes too, I mean, obviously teaching can be somewhat secure, but I think just having a programming job in general is secure. And I think Jason Story was talking a little bit in chat too about this, but if you have like a game programming job, if you've worked at a game studio doing just game code, especially in Unity and C# stuff, it's extremely easy to transfer those skills over to any other C# like programming job or even JavaScripty programming job. So like if you get into the case where you actually just need money, need to do a switch real quick, it's very, very simple. And it's something that I've done, not for the money personally, but just every now and then. There have been a couple times where I just felt like I was getting a little bit burnt out on game development stuff, and took a job doing non-game stuff, doing some enterprise development, C# stuff, web stuff. And every time, like those jobs, they're relatively easy to get because code you write is not as hard as game code. You do need to understand and know like the actual things that they're doing though. Like you can't just go in and say like, hey, I make games, I don't know anything about web stuff and get hired. But if you can, spend a week or two going through a couple courses on web development, you can easily make that switch to any other, like you're talking about .NET stuff. You make a switch to any other C# programming job, and there are ridiculous amounts of them out there in the enterprise. Right? It's like Java, JavaScript, and C#. There are tons and tons of them out there. So it's also really easy to get in. And I mean, those are all, I don't know about in your area, but over here, those are 100K plus jobs all the time.
Yeah, like literally so far I finished. I know the school systems and countries differ, and I always like have to think in my head, how does this work? When I was, so if I'm 19 now, then I'm going to be 20 in 3 months. Yeah, so I think I was 18 when I left what we call sixth form or college, but from college we then go to university, right? So that's at age 18/19 you go to university, and I decided to take a gap year with that year working on my own stuff, and at the end of the year I'd evaluate, okay, is it going well? Can I just continue doing this and not go to university? Or is it perhaps not going well and I should go to university as the safer option for the next 3 years? But within that year, quite a few good things came about, one of those things being the GameDev TV work. So I thought, I'm going to stick with this, it's going well. So I have just gone straight from school into working on all this stuff. I haven't yet actually worked for a company. Well, I guess GameDev TV obviously is a company, but I've not worked as a developer role for a company. Any developer stuff I've done has always been like freelancing and contract-based stuff. So I've got a different kind of perspective on it. I currently don't know what it's like to work in a big company, like a normal job, I guess. That's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was actually planning on recording a video about why I won't let my kids go to college. Like, just because, yeah, I don't want to spoil the whole thing, but yeah, essentially, like, I think that what you're doing is it seems fine to me. Like, if you can do the job without without spending a bunch of time learning how to do it really slowly, I highly recommend it. Obviously there are plenty of jobs that doesn't apply to, but I think that like with software stuff, if you're in the right mindset and you can understand it and you can think through the logic, it's so much faster to learn on your own. Like, I mean, I use 0% of I got my degree in electrical engineering, and like I never use any of it. It was fun. Like, I hung out and wasted a lot of time and money and stuff, but like I realized I didn't actually like it, so I didn't use it. And even if I did, like, I was still like, by the end of it, would have needed to learn a ridiculous amount more to be effective at doing anything exciting. And I've seen like I've met a lot of people who have like master's degrees in programming who can't write code, who've like spent 6 years just going to school, had just a couple of programming courses, understood some algorithms, but literally like couldn't write code. Like, they couldn't make a new simple application to say, I would get applicants, and like hundreds of them come in, and like a lot of them just couldn't solve a very simple problem, but somehow had a degree. I think there's like, if you're going into it and you're spending the time, you really need to make sure that like you're not just picking like randomly, not just picking like, hey, I want to go to this school and learn because it's the close one or whatever. Like, think about what you want to learn and make sure that the place that you're going to go is going to teach you the thing that you want to learn and get you the job that you want to get. And a lot of it, I'd say, is like thinking about the job that you want to get, the thing that you want to do, and that you're not just like spending a bunch of money and time delaying that thing to just because it seems like the easy default path. I think a lot of people fall into that, where it's like the default, just I'll just go do this, and then I don't have to decide, I don't have to make any hard decisions or do any of the hard stuff. I just go do and turn in these assignments and call it good. And then they get out of it and realize that they're still not very far along with the progress. So obviously not the case for everybody. Some people go through and giant success and it's a great experience. But I feel like, yeah, a lot of people just go through and don't get the benefit that they're expecting out of it, right?
Yeah, like I have that conversation a lot with friends that are currently at university or people who have been, and I'm never going in with the intention of telling them you shouldn't have gone to university. I'm genuinely curious, because at least, especially here, it is the default. It's the default pretty much everywhere to just go to uni. So usually, at least in the UK, right, if you talk to someone and a conversation starter might just be, where do you go to university? And I'm just like, I don't. And then they'd probably instantly assume, oh, you've dropped out of university because you're a failure or something. And I'm like, oh, I never even went. I just went a different way. But it's weird for people like to hear that. That like, oh, you didn't go to university? You're not going to get a degree? How are you going to get a job? And I'm just like, oh, I've already got a job. Like, you know, it's fine.
Nope, I already teach.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm not in debt. I didn't have to build up years of debt at university. And like I said, the main reason that I knew I could do it was because I just enjoyed self-teaching anyway. I found out at school when I was bored sitting in classes, and then I'd go home and just teach myself programming. And, you know, normally if I said that to a group of friends, they'd be like, nerd. But in this group of people here watching, everyone can probably relate. Like, yeah, it's it's just how it is. Like at school, they were teaching us Python, and you'd spend an entire like hour-long class learning about like how to declare a class in Python or something. And I'm like, all right, cool, I got it in 5 minutes. What's next? And then just like, no, that's next lesson. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'd just be there like Googling, all right, how to do the next thing in Python, when I was like, that's when I was like starting and I knew nothing about programming. It's like, all right, yeah, variables, all right, functions, and yeah. And then I was like, how do you make games? And then it's like, oh, what? You have to use a game engine? Okay. C#, sure. And then I took a course. I watched YouTube videos or something, and then yeah, I'm here now. So school didn't help me
that much. It's a whole lot faster, man. You spent years learning it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking if I went to university, I'd currently be in my second year of university, and I don't think I would know as much as I know right now just from not going. Because
Would they have even gotten into game development, or would you just be starting with like algorithms
exactly
and what
like
HTML is?
if you're going and you don't know what you're interested in, then sure, you get little bits of knowledge everywhere, and you get to test the waters and be like, oh, maybe I like that area I didn't consider. But then if you know what you want to do, or you have a pretty good idea, teaching yourself is obviously faster because you cut out all the stuff you don't care about. And I'm sure some people would argue, but if you don't try that other thing, how do you know you didn't like it? But there's nothing stopping you when you're self-teaching actually doing that. Like I've dabbled in various different areas and realized, yeah, I'm not into AI that much. Like it's cool and all, but I want to go back to the other stuff I was doing. And at school, you'd probably have an entire like full thing on it, and then you don't want to be there, and you're just having to do it anyway. So
yeah, you're stuck in there, and you also often get stuck at like the speed of the slowest person in the room, right? You're constantly trying to explain the things to whoever's having the hardest time, and I feel like it always just slowed things down for me a lot. Like I just get so bored in class, and I feel like at the end of the week, like I learned maybe one little thing.
Yeah, I enjoyed school and all, but I'm glad to be out at the same time. Yeah. And I actually remember before, just as we were coming to the time when we had to kind of start applying to universities, I said to my computer science teacher that I wasn't wanting to go to university. That like it's still an option that I'm considering, but I don't really want to. And I expected, as most teachers are like, no, you should go to university. It's the best option, and that's what most of my teachers were saying. But then he was just like, no, if you don't need to go to university, don't go. He went and he was like, yeah, don't go.
Yeah, it makes sense for a CS teacher too, because I think that a lot of them are going to know that like the degree isn't what's going to get you the job. It's with computer science and game development in general, like your degree is very, very little, if any, impact on whether or not you get the job. It's primarily about whether or not you can do the job, whether or not you're personable in the interview and you can talk to people, and whether or not you can present that you can do the job with some bit of portfolio or experience or something else that you can show off. Go way further than any degree that you could spend 6 years getting a degree or 3 months making a cool portfolio project and you get way better results out of the. I mean, obviously, if you learn this stuff over the 6 years, not the same, but you know what I mean. Like the value in the actual interview of the work and being able to prove that you can do the work is dramatically more valuable.
Yeah, and most of the like adults I've spoken to that have gone through uni and are now doing game dev in the industry, or whatever else in the same kind of industry, a lot of them, I don't think I've had anyone who has a degree and who said that I should still have a degree, that they like understand my position and they themselves might regret going as well. That seems to be the most common view that I've heard from people, at least, yeah, again, in computer science. I understand certain areas you require a degree, but this is one of the most self-teachable, if not the most self-teachable areas, I guess, that I can think of. Yeah,
and if you're good at self-teaching and you learn fast, it's good. And there's just a lot of info out there now too. I think it was different 20 years ago, but now YouTube and the internet and just all the other stuff out there, there's unlimited amounts of resources. You can download just about any kind of project and see exactly how it looks. I mean, you're not going to understand it first, but you couldn't even do that before. Like that was the kind of thing, like to go find some illegal hack of Unreal or something to look at game source code that nobody understood, right? Now there's tons of info out there.
I feel like someone who's gone to school and then goes into a job and they might come across something they don't know, they're like, we weren't taught that in school. Whereas for people who self-teach, for the most part, it's a case of, I used to be a little bit more, I'd say, embarrassed if I was talking to someone and I didn't know the thing they were on about. But now I'm like less ashamed. I'm just more like, oh, I'll just look it up and learn it, right? I'm much more confident to just go off and learn that thing that I didn't know, as opposed to trying to hide like, yeah, I know about that thing. And then when they ask me something about it, I'm like, no, I don't actually know about it. Now I'm much more like, yeah, I'll just go look it up. I'll spend like an hour or two later just researching it. And yeah, that's the thing.
It's always better to admit when you're not familiar with something and just go, I don't know about that. I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even
worse, I've seen people do that where they're struggling, like, yeah, I know that. And like, they get asked questions and like, oh no. Yeah. Often it's in an interview. Right?
Like, so sometimes people will say like, can you do a video on this thing? And I'm like, that's interesting, and I haven't even done it before, but I'll do it. And I'm thinking, or they might be thinking, wait, but he's never done it before. How can he teach it? And then I'll just go look it up and be like, oh, okay, and then make a video on it. I mean, even today, I learned something new, and it's just because I don't do much 2D. But I'd never really messed in Unity with the spring joint component. And then I was just like, I almost forgot it existed because I've never really used it. And it was like the perfect thing for the job. And then I was like, oh, that was easy. And it's like I use Unity pretty much every day, and there's still parts of the engine I've just never used because they're just, for the most part, not useful to what I'm doing, but they're there ready to be used.
That's going to be the case for everyone.
Like, it's the 80-20 rule, right? It's you use 20% of the stuff 80% of the time. There's going to be plenty of stuff you never use, but it doesn't matter because it's probably not useful most of the time. I'm sure on that right-click create menu, and there's the list of everything you can create, I've probably only used like a few of those buttons ever. There's so many things on there that I've never clicked on. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the benefit, or I guess the effect of it being such a versatile, like, generic engine that works for so many different things. Like,
yeah, they support all the automotive stuff now and like film stuff. There's probably loads of like the package manager's got tons of stuff in there now, popping up every time I look, and I'm like, what is this? What is this for? Oh, it's for like some, I don't know, like XR thing or whatever. I'm like, I've not really messed with that, but it's there, and I'm trying to remember, like, if I ever need to do that, I'll come back to that package maybe or something. There's just so much stuff, you can't know it all, and you shouldn't feel ashamed if you don't know something. Just go look it up if you want to.
Yeah, definitely, and that's what I do. And I feel like also, I don't know if you get the same sense, but for me, the best way for me to learn something and really understand it is when I do a video on it, because I feel like have to really understand it, and like everything I do, I'm like, if I'm not exactly sure why the thing happened, I feel like I need to go find out why it happened and look it up just so that I can explain why it happened when it happens in my video. You know, like I'm doing something like, the heck was that? Like, I'll go look it up. I'm like, okay, and I'll go find out some other extra little bit of info. And I feel like I constantly learn more as I record and teach, right? Like the more I teach, the better I get at it, assuming that I'm not just teaching the same thing over and over.
Yeah, when you're like working on your own project, you can be a bit sloppy and like spend like you can just do like a quick workaround and come back in half an hour and fix it. If you're doing a video, people aren't going to want you to just leave a sloppy bit in there and like forget about it. If it's a video, it has to be a little bit more thought out. And like you said, you might go to record a video you're pretty confident on, like, I know how to do this thing, I've done it so many times before, and you start making it, and then you come in across an issue. And sometimes those issues are knowledge based, but I've had them where it's like I thought that thing was going to work, and then I realized, like with the input system, oh, I have to roll back to use the both because it doesn't support the new input system. And now that's something I should probably mention in the video, because if I don't mention it, people will be like, oh, this doesn't work because I have the wrong input system version, and they get that comment like 100 times. So yeah, you've got
that's exactly right. It's all those things that like you don't realize or you miss, or the worst ones are the ones that you don't happen on your own system too. Or like you do it, you release it, and you're like, oh, I forgot about that because it didn't happen this one time on my system. Especially like sprite layer orders. Like, you know, you build and suddenly the order layer is random and like forgot to set them. Like, oops.
Yeah, I mean, like, so I don't do much 2D, but I recently have been doing a bit of 2D stuff and trying to understand how the layer system is. Like, it's similar, but it's a little bit different. I mean, like, the fact that it doesn't use the Z, the fact it uses the layer thing, to me feels weird. But then, like, that's just because I've done 3D, and I'm like, well, obviously, if that object's closer to the camera, then it's going to be rendered on top. Duh. But no, not necessarily.
Yeah, and when you get in there, if you leave everything on the same layer and you switch to just a different system, it may render in a different order. Or you do a build and they may render in a different order, and your player's suddenly behind the background and stuff.
That's a good thing to know in case I do build and forget to set the order.
I've done that. Yeah, I did that in one of my videos.
I mean, like you said, that's a good thing about doing the videos, is you find things you either didn't know or that you knew but you just forgot about because, you know, making a video
didn't think about it. Yeah, it happens all the time.
Or like sometimes even like I've uploaded a video and maybe in editing I've accidentally cut out a bit of information that I've added in to help people, but I've like recut it out, and then now I'm like, the thing is, you can't just you can't edit the video. Like, you've got the little trimming tool you have, but you can't like upload a fresh video in place of that one without taking that one down, which makes sense logistically, because you could get like 1 million views on a really good video and take it down and just put up some other piece of rubbish, and wow, look at that, rubbish has 1 million views.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly the problem they have to deal with there. But yeah, it is frustrating. Yeah, when you mess up a video, you're like, I got to either delete the whole thing or leave it.
Yeah. Someone's asking, like, how steep is the learning curve for multiplayer networking? I guess we'll assume you've done single player and you want to go that next step to multiplayer. I think personally it depends on if you've played multiplayer games and you're a program. Personally, when I play games, I some of the time try and think like, I wonder how they did that thing. You know, I'm guessing other people do that too. So with multiplayer games, like, I don't know, if I see a health bar, I'm thinking like, all right, obviously I take damage in that health bar of health changed event and that updates some UI or whatever. So when I came to starting multiplayer games, I already had a good idea of how it worked. The server client stuff. Not like a perfect understanding, but I think a good basis. And then the documentation and the examples, I think examples are a really good way to learn that. Like, I think Mirror has the Pong examples really good. It's so simple, but it's what you want, right? I know they have client authoritative movement for that, just because it's a bit simpler, but it's still, you get the idea of how it works.
Yeah, and when you're starting, you want to probably just leave it client authoritative at first anyway, until you get familiar with how to get the networking working, and then start switching over to be a little bit more server authoritative on stuff. I keep everything on the clients at first, and then slowly transition as you, even starting with like something simple like a chat app. It just like sends chat through Unity in a little text box. Like something like that is an easier one, I think, to do than an actual game where you're trying to move objects, because you have 100% control over what messages are being sent and when. But like as far as the curve, it's definitely like, for me, it's hard because I feel like I will undersell how hard it is because I've been doing it for too long. But it doesn't feel very different anymore from single player code, in the code side at least. Like there's a couple extra steps. It's all just about knowing when and where to call shit.
Yeah.
Like where do you call this method and how do I call it? And how do I spawn things? Like that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I would say like if you haven't built single player stuff though, I would definitely not jump into multiplayer.
Yeah, because normally you might have that health variable, and then in start you set it to the max health, but then you got to think, but on the server needs to be the one in control of that, and that needs to be synced, and then once that's synced, clients need to, let's say, update the health bars, so they need some callback for when that variable has been synced to then do that other thing. And you know, then I think I use events quite a bit, and I think multiplayer I use them even more because there's just so many things which are happening delayed, and you could in the update just say, obviously, set the health bar to be the health, set the health bar to match the health, whatever. But ideally you just update it when the server sends you your new health value to update the UI. Yeah, rather than just...
The other thing, you gotta deal with people connecting and disconnecting too, and player management and all that stuff. There's a lot of extra stuff that comes in that you end up having to deal with. But again, multiplayer games are fun. I'll do a stream on them soon, and like, you got a course on it. It seems like, I think anybody who's got enough experience just building a single player game should be able to probably go through your course and build out a multiplayer game. I think relatively easily from what I've seen of it. Yeah,
the programming we kind of expect people to have is a knowledge on events, a knowledge on interfaces, which are used a bit but very minimally, and just general things about overriding functions, because there's a lot of overriding in the network manager and the network behavior to hook into like when this object starts running on the server, when it stops running on the client, and all those various things. So if you have an understanding of how those work, then you should be good to go. The first section is short and simple, just each lecture is separate about different things, like I said, syncing variables, remote procedure calls, server authority. And then the second is like, all right, we've got through the theory, got through the boring stuff, let's make an actual game with tanks moving, shooting, spawning buildings in, and it's all obviously networked, and it works pretty well. So that's obviously me proclaiming like how good it is, but yeah, I'm sure like
I said, I checked it out, it seemed good, so
yeah, if you say so, then it must be true. There we go, that's enough to convince people, right? Your word. So someone said I heard from the channel on GameDev TV's AMA, I'm going through the Unity course, how did you keep yourself motivated while learning, and what tips can you give? I'm guessing because he said about the course, did he mean how did I say motivated making the course? Because that took quite a while. Like if I was making that game just as the game on its own, I could make it a lot quicker than 3 months. It took about 3 months to make and record all the content and edit it, because that's obviously a lot of extra stuff to do. I have to go slower. I have to do it in an order that makes sense to teach, which is different sometimes to the order it makes sense to just make the game. I think, you're nodding in agreement there. It's
very different, yes. not always very different, but especially at the beginnery level, like you gotta make sure you cover all of the core stuff before you get to the harder things.
Yeah, because normally I'll just jump straight in and make it, but if it's something I'm teaching, I've got to be like, all right, they might not know about that, or that needs a bit more explanation before I go into it, or maybe the movement makes sense before the firing, which makes sense anyway, but yeah, like
getting all the prerequisites.
Exactly.
And when it comes to learning too, if they're asking just about like staying motivated while learning, for me, what I like to do and recommend is having people build out really small games, lots of little small games, even if they're going through a course or something else. Building out little micro mini games, the kind of thing that like you might see built in a stream or something, but spending like a week or 2 weeks going through and building out something really easy. Like I like to recommend games that have like a single mechanic with a single input and that work on mobile that you can describe in like 15 seconds, where you do this thing and it gets points, and like building out those and finishing them and releasing them and then sharing them with people is the bigger part. So like if you assuming that you have people around that you can share it with, it doesn't have to be a bunch of people, but you got kids, wife, family, parents, whatever. You can give them the thing like, here's my phone. I made this little game, try it out, and make it simple, something that they can play in like 30 seconds. Doesn't require any training. Like I said, these are the kind of games that you should be building because they're going to be nice and quick and simple to build. It'll motivate you like crazy, and you can get them done really fast. If you set the scope to small, you can get them done, release them, and learn from them, and then just ditch it and build the next one, and the next one will get better, and the next one will get better, and just keep repeating that process over and over while you're doing the coursework and stuff that you're doing. Because what you see, if you're going, I assume they're going through the new released Unity course that they did. While you're going through that, you're going to be learning and picking up new skills and things, and I would use those in your next game. You go like, hey, I remember this thing I learned, I'll try implementing that in the next little mini game. That's what I would recommend though.
Yeah, like with making lots of games and stuff. So I've made plenty of Unity games over the years. I not necessarily released a lot of them because, again, obviously being an indie dev and like releasing a game and putting all that time and effort in and making it successful, it isn't guaranteed. It's it's quite risky. Obviously, it can pay off, but and I've had a lot of the education side of things to do. I haven't had to think about releasing, but I've not wanted to miss out on it. So I have taken part in quite a few game jams as a reason to like get something made and out in like 2 days or something. So I've taken part in at least 3 or 4 game jams so far, and the only reason I haven't done the recent ones is because I've been busy. But if I have the time, I try and do Ludum Dare, and I did or Ludum Dare, and I did Global Game Jam back in January this year. I was in the Netherlands at the time, and I did it at the University of Amsterdam while I was there. It was pretty fun, and then I'm looking forward to whenever the next one is, but there probably won't be a Global Game Jam soon, I imagine. I don't think that'll be starting back for a while. But or maybe
those are great idea too. Doing the game jams and stuff are really good because they give you you get a theme a lot of time, most of the time, and it gives you some idea and context, and you get that nice tight time limit. They're a little bit harder for like super new developers because they're not going to be able to actually finish their game in that time. But once you've got, I'd say once you've built a couple things, you'd definitely be getting into game jams too. They're a blast. They're a short commitment, and you'll meet people. I don't know if you've met a lot of people, but generally you meet a lot of people doing game jams, talking to people on Discord servers and other stuff. So it's cool stuff. I highly recommend that too.
Yeah, I think all except the Global Game Jam I did solo. I could just go at my own pace. I was kind of newer at the time back then, and then with that one, like we had a team of 4 or 5 people, I think. I can't remember now. 4 or 5 people, and it was a bit of a different dynamic. I'd say it was more difficult because we had to actually sort a few more things out about like source control and getting everyone on board and sending everyone to do their own things, because I hadn't actually had much experience working on a team before, or at least a team bigger than 2, right? Like I'd worked on stuff that big, but with 4 or 5 people on a game in 2 days as well, right? We didn't have ages to plan and sort things out. That time was effectively wasted time because we weren't making the game. But if we didn't do it, then it could go even worse. But it has been good fun. I think the main benefit to game jams is the time constraint, because I could give myself a time constraint and say this weekend I'll make a game in 2 days. I'm not going to do it. I'll just play games. But if like there's a not tournament, like it's a competition. I don't even enter it to win, but the fact there's something that exists that loads of people are taking part in, then I'll and I enter it just because they say you've got 2 days. I feel like now I actually am motivated to do it. Someone else telling me to do it makes me do it more than myself, I guess.
Yeah, external deadline and external pressure will help a lot. Also, telling people that you're doing it too. If you're building out a little mini game and you're gonna give it to them, tell them before. I mean, it doesn't work for everybody, but you tell the right people, and you're gonna feel some pressure to actually continue and get it done. Obviously, only do that if you really actually want to do the thing and you plan to do it. But you tell. A lot of time, I'll tell my wife before. Like if I have a big idea of something that I think is going to be hard and that I think that I might try to back out of, I'll tell her that I'm going to do it, because then I feel like I can't back out of it because I already told my wife I was going to do it, and I can't look like a I gotta do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I have any more insight on this. I spoke with you know Jabrils or Jabril.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had him on stream and he expressed his hatred towards game jams. He really doesn't like them. I thought, because I think one of his most popular videos is about his game jam experience, and it seemed like he enjoyed it, I guess, or it was an interesting experience. But yeah, when we were talking about,
I'll have to watch that. I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check it out. Yeah. I've had great experiences with game jams. I mean, I've met a lot of really close friends working on games at game jams, and like we'll come back together and meet up again at jams and stuff, and we'll work on stuff outside of it and send people. Like I've met people that I've given jobs to or gotten jobs from at game jams, all kinds of stuff, like just meeting people. I always say when you're going to the jams, if you're going, obviously the in-person ones probably aren't happening anytime soon, but when you go to those and you do it, I'd focus a lot more on not just like the project and trying to win, but also just on the community and meeting the people, understanding what they do, and kind of getting to know people along the way too. Like contributing to the project, obviously, you don't want to be like the only person on the team that's not doing stuff on the project. You want to be contributing, but also just talking to people, communicating, getting out there. Because all of the people, like I said, you know, in a normal situation, like people are gonna give you shit and call you a nerd or whatever. But at game jams, like we're all nerds, so nobody is mean. Everybody's relatively chill.
Yeah, like
it's pretty calm, and like you can just talk about a random anime thing or a video game thing, and half the people there are going to be into it.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, it's a very different experience than most of society, I guess.
Yeah.
But you got it. Yeah. I don't know. I have to check out his experience. So I wonder what that was like.
Yeah. At the one I went to in person, it was like, we're all just there, yeah, talking about games, like you say, just chilling, all similar interests, eating, like all the food they had given for us. Like there's, I'm slipping on my words. There was an admission fee, which was pretty cheap, and that covered like being able to obviously stay there, sleep there, and eat there. The food was all like in that fee, and it was all just like pizza and stuff. That's basically it.
Oh, it's like pizza, energy drinks, soda. Some of them just have lots of beer too. They'll have kegs and pizza and just hang out and drink and code games all night.
It was the weekend before I came back home, so like I had to on the final day like get back, sleep, get up in the morning, aeroplane back home, and all that stuff. But yeah, and then
the worst part is that when you're sleeping over at them. I used to be able to do that all the time. Now I'm like, I gotta find a bed nearby or something. Like I can't sleep on the floor anymore.
That's the thing, because
I've gotten too old. But I used to do it all the time.
I didn't
sleeping on the desk or under the desk or.
Yeah, I slept on the floor, so
I used to do that all the time. I'd bring like blankets and sleeping bags and pillows and.
Yeah, we went and stole but we went and grabbed cushions from like the lounge areas and took them into our like rooms we were in and used those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Take the couch cushions.
That's what we did. Yeah, and then obviously, we had to tidy up in the morning, but still, it was a good experience. It was fun.
It's usually I've always had a great time with them. So
yeah. What else? How do you recommend setting up a code portfolio? Is it better to use my own projects or to create separate projects for that purpose?
So for me, I would say that a game portfolio is going to be a little bit more valuable than the actual having the code even visible. Mostly just because people are much more likely to click through and play your game than they are to read through your code and determine whether or not they think it's good code. And one little thing in there is going to be enough to just kind of set them as like, oh, this is bad. Like if all they're seeing is the code. I'd say it's much more important to give them a little playable demo of a thing that you've built on your own, and something short, something that is playable in like 30 seconds, max of like a minute to understand it, where you're going through and just playing some game, ideally like a WebGL build too, where they don't have to install or run anything, because if you give them an executable, it's like a 50% chance they just delete it because they don't trust it, right? If they don't have a virtual machine to run it on, which is smart, because like, I mean, any hacker could just pretend that they're applying for a job and send something in and have it be a virus that breaks into the network. So having a web version that's playable, and if a web version is just not an option, at least having like a 30-second video that shows the game that you built in the gameplay. But ideally having a playable little game in there that's fully polished, runs right, doesn't have any issues, and is somewhat fun, is the number one thing I would recommend. And then you could link to the code after that and show that stuff. But most of the people, like when you're looking at resumes for developers, a lot of time you're looking at like, you came in and it's Monday or Wednesday or whatever day, like, okay, I got to look at resumes today, and you've got 10 or 20 or 100 of them or something. You're going to look through, you're going to look at the resume, you look at the top part, there's probably going to be a portfolio page. You'll click through to that. If that looks terrible, you might just go on to the next one. Depending on how big that stack is, you might just move on to the next one, like unless there's something that really stands out on the resume. So having a portfolio page that's very visible at the top and having it stand out and be like a fun thing that like people are going to talk about. If your portfolio page has the little mini game that's fun and funny that everybody played, and again, doesn't have to be complicated. It can be like essentially like a little micro game, but something that's polished and clean. If it's the thing that multiple people have tried out and they're talking about it, a way better chance than the person who shared off 30 GitHub repos that nobody looked through because they don't want to go read some applicant's code at the first stage, right? Getting into the code stuff, like that might happen when they get like past the first calls, like the first phone interviews, and they want to actually bring you in for an interview. They may look at the code in between that step or maybe at that step. But even then, it's very rare that I don't know a lot of programmers who hire that just go through people's code without any context and make the decision. Like usually they'll want to go through the code with people and do some more verification, because the code that's in your repo could be anything, right? It could be your worst code. It could be your best code. It could just be stuff that you copied and pasted from somewhere else. It's really hard to know without it. But having that demo that just stands out and is flashy and gets people's attention there is way bigger.
Yeah, I feel like well, it's like you could have taken this whole one up anyway, because you have the experience with actually reviewing applicants, I guess, by the sounds of it. So
yeah, and the ones that stand out for me are always in fact, like a lot of the time, what me and at least some of the guys that I know would do is just look at the ones with the portfolios first. Right? Like if they had a portfolio page on it, they look at those first and look at the other ones later, because the other ones require more work. You gotta like dig through and start researching the people and see who they are. The portfolio ones, I can just go and click and see like, hey, what did they do? Is it good? Is it terrible? Do they not have anything there?
Yeah, and like
the ones that are good, they just kind of get like set into a pile. Like, hey, this dude made a cool thing. This girl made something awesome. Like, like make a little stack there, and then at least that's the way it works for me.
Yeah, like Jason said, the biggest mistake people have is on their portfolio having everything they've ever made, and it's the same for like artists or anything. What is the reason why? I guess people think it might be a good idea because it's showing progress over time, but at the end of the day, the person hiring you, I mean, I'm speaking for people hiring, but I imagine it's no good knowing, all right, 5 years ago when you started you were making that stuff, what are you making now is what I want to know. Like, what is it?
And you don't even know, like, if you're not that person, you don't know that like the 5-year thing was necessarily the 5-year thing unless you really spend the time and energy to figure that out. You might think like, oh, that's the new thing, right? So put your best foot forward for sure, like the best things on there only, and don't put all of don't put all of the projects that you've ever made or every school project that you ever made and submitted. Like nobody cares about your 2-week or 1-month school project when you're applying, unless it's like your big main final project thing and there's really something impressive about it. But like listing off all of them doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
In fact, I feel like it kind of makes it seem like you haven't put like there's less.
Yeah.
Like you've listed off everything and it was a bunch of little things.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if you're expecting them, if you see someone's portfolio and you've put loads of things, and let's say it's like 10 different things, well then if you're then assuming that's all their stuff, and then you might think that's not a lot. Whereas if they put like 2 things, you assume they've put their best stuff. They've probably got a lot more that they've worked on, but this is high quality stuff they've given here.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not showing off the bad things, right? They don't like the bad. They think like, oh, the bad things are bad, and whatever, they're not too bad because these things are great, right?
Yeah.
And they're not going to think about like, hey, are they going to do this bad one? They're going to think like, hey, we're going to do this cool thing.
Yeah. Another one on multiplayer here. Once you know how to manage multiplayer networking, is the knowledge the same for other genres of games? I'd say so, yeah.
Not completely. I would say that the core is, but there are definitely, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier, there are definitely big differences in how you would build like an RTS network-wise versus a first-person shooter.
Yeah, the difference being like, obviously some games, like let's say you're making like a card game, you don't need this prediction of movement at like high, this police car going past or something, but yeah, you don't need to. Let's say you're playing a competitive shooter, and it's super precise. Every little bit matters. It needs to be as perfect as possible. All latency has to be taken into consideration. If you're playing like Hearthstone or something, a card game, then if you play that card and they see it 5 seconds later, it's not the end of the world at all. Like, it's fine. Ideally it's responsive enough, but it comes along with server costs as well, like you said. If the game needs like a lot more messages that are bigger being sent a lot more frequently, it's going to cost you more than a game that's more idle, like where you only need to send something every so often. So
yeah, and how you'll code it too is going to change, I think. I mean, depending on the genre. Even like just jumping to a game where you have a bunch of units, like a strategy game or an MMO or something, you're going to be dealing with even a strategy game and MMO, you're going to do very differently too, because with a strategy game, a lot of time you're going to want to do like a lockstep networking system where everybody's kind of running the same deterministic simulation, and it's synchronized, but you're not having to synchronize the position and rotation of everything. Because while that works great at first, like as you start to scale up and you get to hundreds of units on multiple teams, it quickly falls apart. So you have to use slightly different techniques for that versus like you've got 8 players or 32 players running around and they're just spamming constant as fast as possible their position and rotation stuff and their predictions of what they're going to be doing. So there's some difference, but the core part, and as long as you're not scaling out, like you want to build a card game, a strategy game, a shooter or RPG that's not like scaled out to tons of players, you can do that with exactly the same kind of setup, and then eventually you'll hit the constraints and go, oh crap, I got to change this because now it's falling apart at scale. So
yeah, it's the 80-20 rule again. Like if you know how to sync variables and call RPCs and commands back between the server and the client, then you don't know everything, but you know enough pretty much just to get on with it and start making a game, right? It's like, oh, you want to spawn that thing in? As long as you know how to spawn in an object over the network, then it's the same regardless of the genre. Just like saying if you learn Unity making a platformer, can you then make an FPS? It's like, might not be the easiest thing in the world to just immediately get into it, but you should have the skills or the knowledge to be able to do it. And obviously you always need to have Google tab open ready to go, but that's the thing. People also assume, oh, Nathan, you teach, so you can't use documentation and look up stuff. No, I have it open all the time. Even when I'm making YouTube videos, I sometimes have documentation open ready, just in case I slip up and I'm like, wait, I forgot what that thing is. Luckily IntelliSense helps for the most part. It saves me having to look stuff up a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, I go through documentation all the time too, and videos and people's courses, all kinds of stuff. I feel if you're not, it's really hard to learn, right? You got to just be out there constantly learning stuff, especially if you want to teach things. But I mean, just to build games too, like I feel like you got to be constantly learning to be a software developer. Plus, it's fun. Like I'm probably just a weirdo though. Like I have a lot of fun just learning about new code things and new game dev stuff, new tricks and techniques and stuff. Now, I have a blast with that. Yeah,
it's like people sometimes assume you learn and then you teach, but you can learn while teaching. You probably learn some stuff first to get started, obviously. Like, when I started making my first videos back, like, 2 years ago, I didn't know a whole lot, but I knew enough to make those tutorials, even if they weren't amazing at the time. But then, like, over time, I've learned new stuff, made new videos, learned new stuff, made new videos. I usually do videos on what I'm learning at the time, or what I've just learned. And then once I've made that video, I'm looking at something else, or going into that topic in more detail to make part 2, or this thing more advanced next time, or whatever. So Yeah, always learning, always learning.
I think that happens for all of us. Like I
Yeah.
do the same. I learn something and want to do a video on it, or I use something in a project and I'm like, oh, I should do a video on that. Like it's fresh in my mind. It's the thing that like I feel like I understand really well at the time for that minute, and like I want to record this and get it out there while I know it before I forget it all. Right?
Yeah. We have a question. Someone saying that they're going to graduate next year, but they also want to take a gap year next year to focus solely on game dev. Is that worth the risk? I mean,
I mean, for me, yes. As long as you're actually doing the code. The one thing, like, if you don't go to school and you just sit around and play video games and don't do anything, that's definitely worse, right? I'd say that's the worst option, because then you don't have anything forcing you towards progress. But if you're able to just force yourself to do it and force yourself to do the actual learning, I would say I would probably do exactly that. I would just start, and I wouldn't even wait. Like, don't like. I would say if you feel like you have to wait until you're done with high school, then maybe you should go into the university or something. But what you should really do is just start now. Like start while you're in school. Obviously you got to dedicate time to graduating and stuff. Usually a senior year is, at least here, relatively easy compared to the other ones, and you should be able to find the time. You just really got to set aside the time and build up that discipline of, even if it's only like 2 hours a day, just spending the 2 hours a day doing some sort of development and learning. If you can get into that habit and you can actually force yourself to do the learning on your own, without a doubt, yeah, just get in there, start building games, start learning how to code and start doing it. But if you find that you're just, unlikely to do that, or you think that need something to push you, then I would find something to get that push. But it's really just about yeah, putting forth the energy and learning it, and also I guess making sure that you can self-learn, that you can go through it, you understand it, and you're not getting lost constantly. There is some benefit of having some instruction if you're really having a hard time, like if you can't get through the self-taught part yourself. But I would start with the self-taught stuff now, and then by the time you graduate, you'll know whether or not you need it. Like if you're able to keep building things and you're seeing progress and you feel like you're growing forward, it'll be a pretty easy decision, I think. And if you're not seeing that, then it's probably a good fallback to force yourself into something that's going to force you to do the learning.
Yep. I think we'll take maybe one or two more questions. It's getting close to being 8 p.m. for me. Right, so someone is making a roguelike. Any tips on level design? And obviously we're assuming because it's a roguelike, it's procedurally generated to some extent, because as far as I'm aware, pretty much every roguelike I've played has, even if it's just pre-made rooms being stuck on top of each other, right? Or not on top, but next to each other. Or like Hades, the one I played recently, they're not even trying to like connect doorways together to make the room layout. They just have a room and you walk out of a door and you're in a new room, which is even easier because they don't have to fit together perfectly at all. They just work.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It simplifies it a bit. Yeah, on design stuff, I'm terrible too. Like at actual designing levels, like I'm so bad at it. Usually what I do, in fact, what I did earlier this week, so in one of my courses, 2D programmer course, the platformer, and like I can write the code, I can build the stuff, but like making a cool level is terrible for me. Like I'm just not good at it. But like making a fun like little mechanic or puzzle, so I call up my friend who's a game designer. I called him up, I think it was Sunday or Monday, whatever day it was that I had a little bit of time. Called him up and hop on. I'm like, hey, here's what I've got. Give me a couple cool fun game. Give me a couple cool design ideas of like things that I could add in as challenges. And he's just, because he's a game designer and he's constantly doing this, he's bam, 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 like nailing them out. So I don't know why I went into that, other than I guess just to really nail in that like some people are really good at game design, and professional game designers, like that's what they do. They're really good at it. Some programmers are really good at game design. I feel like I'm a terrible game designer, or at least not a good game designer, like a programmer level game designer maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have any great advice for actual level building, other than ask somebody who's really good at actual level building.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
It's a very different skill from programming. It's like night and day difference. I think like one's very much a logical, technical, step-by-step thing, and the other is very much an artistic and fun thing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie and say I'm good at level design either. I mean, it's not really my strong point. I do enjoy doing it sometimes as a little bit of a break from the programming to then come back to it after I've made like like something to navigate around in the world, even if it's just cubes, even if it's just really low poly models I've made in Blender or something, just to make it feel a bit more alive. I prefer going into Blender and making some really quick like just models than going on the asset store and importing random models. I don't know. Like, I just feel like, oh, I made it, even if it's bad. At least I made it, and it just, you know, it's all there.
You're more artistic and patient than I am. I prefer to just jump on and grab something that looks nice, like bam, like look at that level, that looks good.
I think the worst thing is grabbing assets from different asset packs when they're all completely different themes and everything to put into one scene. I think
them all together.
Yeah, you enjoy doing that.
No, I just like the my favorite are the big asset packs that have like a full environment already built out and a bunch of props in them. And then the artist also did some characters, so I can grab like their character pack and their environment and like slap it all together. And I'm like, oh, this is great. Now I can build my game. And I don't have to explain what it is to people that I'm trying to run it through. Like that this square is supposed to be a goblin shooting out a fireball or something.
Yeah. What was the question again? Roguelike. That was it, roguelike. I mean,
just and game design.
Yeah. I mean, a while ago I did a couple of videos on making a roguelike, then I realized every time I've tried to do a series on YouTube, it doesn't work. That's why, like, I've got plenty of multiplayer videos, but they're kind of standalone on the channel. And then that's why the course is an actual full game, because I can go a lot more, I can go slower, in more detail, tons of content, and it's, yeah. But what I did was, I thought, well, I can't make this on the channel, really, so I ended up streaming it, like, just the full development. I would, like, do a few hours each day on Twitch, just streaming the development of a roguelike, and it wasn't like a finished product by the end. I worked on it for about a month for like a couple hours each day, and it was mainly just led by like suggestions by chat, because roguelikes, one of the best things is just there are tons of different items that do weird and wacky things a lot of the times. So I'd just be getting loads of suggestions and just writing down the ones that I thought would be fun, and just making like loads of different kinds of weapons that, like, I remember we had some kind of rainbow laser gun that used, was it the particle system I think I used for it? I think I used like particles, and then I ticked the trail box so that like I had 5 particles like separated by a bit, and then they'd all have a trail, but the particle would be invisible, so you just see like a rainbow effectively. Probably wasn't the easiest way to do it, but I don't know. We had some fun with that, and I did procedural level generation, but I didn't have it so, or at least I planned on originally having it where the doors between the rooms do connect, but it was just becoming too complicated. I couldn't be bothered. So I was like, okay, all I'll do is I'll just randomly spawn a layout of rooms and connect them together via like little teleporters. So you clear the room, a little teleporter pops up, and then that's linked to another room, and you go in there, and that one might have another 3 teleporters to go off to 3 separate rooms. And I made sure they were like dead ends, so it didn't just recursively generate a world forever. And I had some kind of hard-coded limits where like, if we get to about like, I don't know, 40 rooms, then only spawn dead ends from now on or something like that. And yeah, I mean, it went okay. Considering like what it is, it's a very in-depth thing. It also had randomized like procedural loot, like in the chests, the rarity of the loot, and then in that rarity, pick one of the random items in the game that is that rarity, and then put that in the chest or whatever. Yeah, I can't remember what other systems we made, but like ammo and reloading and stuff. It was fun.
Nice. Those are always fun to build too, but I'm terrible with procedural generation too. Like, I mean, making things that actually come out and look cool.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. Like, every time I build a procedural generator, like I can do it and set it up, but like I always feel like my hand built stuff is so much better. Or the designer's hand built stuff is so much better. Obviously, it doesn't apply so much to roguelikes, but almost every other type of game.
Yeah. I did a stream a while ago making like Crossy Road in a few hours, and I did that like it's kind of procedural. I made a prefab for like a strip of road, a strip of like river, and a strip of grass, and then because there's like the different, as you go along it just swaps, right? And then it would just randomly spawn them in with an offset so that it built out the road, and as they went behind the camera they'd get like replaced or whatever, and
okay.
And then it kept spawning new, and it worked. It just kept going and it worked. And
those make sense. Yeah, I just think like I can think of a lot of scenarios where I tried to build out like procedural generation to build out actual maps for people to play on and stuff, and like maps are always subpar.
Yeah.
Or bad, or like the dungeons that'll generate like this.
Yeah. Well, say if you have...
But this it can be good for like a starting point too. If anybody who's using procedural generation, you can generate out like a map as a starting point with some kits. Especially there are a lot of assets out there that do it now too. Generate it out and then start using that as like a base and then modify, so you don't have to build out a giant map. You build out, the key parts of it, the points of interest, and then all the other stuff be auto generated.
Yeah, I mean, if your generation has mountains and caves and stuff, it's got to be actually playable. Whereas if it's like Crossy Road, where you've just got to tap and go across, and as long as all you need is just a piece of something to appear next, whether that's water, grass, or road, it doesn't matter. So you're never gonna have some weird generation where it just breaks. Whereas if you're trying to like generate some Minecraft-like terrain, there's so many weird bits of the world where the algorithm that generates it was just a bit weird. Like, this isn't natural, but whatever. People just ignore it for the most part. Because it's pretty good for the most part. It actually does, look right. But I've seen people do videos on, like, making terrain procedurally, and it just looks really bad. And I understand they made it really quickly for a video to show how to do it. Not saying I could do any better, but it's not what you'd expect in a game where that's, like a published game that has procedural terrain generation. It's hard. It looks very...
Yeah, that's a lot more complicated than the simple, like, pick a random size and a random height and texture and stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we should close it out there, maybe. We say goodbye. I'll just check. Are there any more questions we had? I mean, there's probably some we've missed, like I said. Let's look in the chat. Yeah, people are talking about their procedural generation flashbacks. Jason saying, yeah, don't make just like multiplayer, don't make your first project procedural generation either. These are a little bit more advanced topics than, just making like a single tap game or a little 2D movement with a platformer or whatever else, right? Just keep it simple, especially for the first, not even just the first project, maybe even the first couple or few projects.
Until you feel really comfortable, I would say.
Yeah.
And you have a need for the other thing, the jump, really.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in this week. I usually, if I know who's coming next week, I'll say, but I don't have a clue right now. So look out on the channel. I'll put up a stream schedule page as soon as we know. Thanks, Jason, for joining me on the show.
But you forgot to tell them to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe and share this video everywhere.
Yeah. Let me just do the pop-ups 1 sec. There we go. Yep. Go to all those links. Check Jason's channel out down below. Go like, subscribe the stream. Well, subscribe to the channel. Go check out Jason's channel and be sure to subscribe there. I'm talking too fast. Did you mention what you cover to people in case they're interested?
I think so at the beginning. Just game development, programming, solid principles, all kinds of just game dev stuff. Just teach people how to make games. So check out the channel, check out the site. It's all there. Fun stuff. But yeah, and I check out the multiplayer course too. The one Nathan did here on Mirror. Like I said, I grabbed it. I'm going through it this morning to make sure that I'm all fresh with it for my next stream and see if you got some cool tips in there, and it seems good, and it's on sale today too, so why not? Yeah, before Black Friday sales run out. And Mick, be sure to link it in the chat. He's there linking. That's your channel, I think he's linking there. Okay. But yeah, make sure to link that course in there too. Yep. Go grab it. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I think that's everything, and I'll see you there next week. So bye.